Okay, three, two, and one. Well, good day and good evening, everyone, and welcome to another session of Working in UX Design. It's your host, Dalen, over here, and I have a very special guest with me today, and her name is Anna. So, Anna was most recently with the super app of the Southeast Asia region, Grab, and she was the lead product manager over there, playing a very pivotal role in Grab's super app journey, contributing to the early launch of GrabPay and the regional expansion of GrabFood across Southeast Asia. She has led multiple products and supported millions of merchants with accurate and timely payments. So the interesting thing is that I only managed to get Anna because she's currently studying and she's pursuing her master's in fintech at NYU Stern right now, where she's exploring emerging technologies that are going to shape the future of financial products. She's also a mentor to startups as well as product managers and any aspiring professionals who are building a career in tech. So Anna actually started her career in private banking before she actually entered the technology sector, and I happened to know her for quite a number of years as well before she became a product manager. So welcome to the show, Anna. How are you feeling today?
Thanks, Dalen. I'm very excited to share my experience here. I know there are a lot of people tuning in from different parts of the world, and some are already in tech, or if not, they are exploring to venture into tech. I've been there and done that. Very happy to share my personal experience.
Awesome. So Anna, we were just talking about Grab earlier, and I had a very chance encounter with your CEO recently over the weekend. I saw him kind of like delivering things, and I thought he was doing one of those PR things again, where he actually went to immerse himself in the role of a delivery partner. So, and you earlier when we were having a very brief chat, you mentioned to me that's actually part of the culture. It's not just a PR thing. It's actually part of the culture. Even you as a product manager, you're encouraged to do that. Can you share a little bit more about like what does that entail? Why do you guys spend time, becoming delivery partners just to get into things and try and immerse yourself in the product?
So I don't think this experience is just unique for today. I remember when I first joined Grab in the late 2016 as an intern. By the way, I'm probably one of the older intern at Grab history. Back then, when we had that, how do you call it, like new joiner onboarding, we were actually mandated to shadow the drivers throughout the different trips to really empathize how it is like to be a driver, right? And fast forward to today, even until today, one of the key culture term at Grab we use a lot is called ground truths. So ground truths is not just about quantitative data, it's also about qualitative, right? So how do we get qualitative data? Is by talking to the end user. And and it is really true that it's part of Grab culture DNA because we are often encouraged to go down to the merchants or restaurants to really chat with the owner or the restaurant operation staff to really understand their pain points or any opportunities that we could solve.
I think that's such an excellent practice and excellent culture movement within the company itself. Is it a requirement? Is there like a certain KPI, like for example, you have to speak to five merchants every month or something like that? Is there like a hard requirement to
No,
meet?
there is not a hard requirement. It's just part of the culture, right? So, but having said that, though, because based in Singapore, probably is easier because we do interact with drivers or like a merchant user quite easily. But when we do make a business trip, for example, where Grab operates around 8 countries in the market, um, typically we would have a very proper planning, like we call it the user research trip planning, where um, we want to maximize that entire business trip where we would schedule like back-to-back interviews with our end users in their original like work setting. For example, if the merchant is working, we would just go there and observe how they what's their user flow is like. And then later on, we could sit down and have similar to this like one-on-one interview process by like bouncing off some ideas like how the team could actually identify better ways to improve their workflow.
Wow. And you're doing that as a product manager. I mean, as a product manager, I would imagine you're sitting in the office, you're kind of like strategizing and maybe like handling your business stakeholders, but you yourself, you're actually going out there together with the user research team to do all of these things. And how do you think that impacts the way you think about products or build products just because you're doing that?
Actually, yes, product manager typically will lead that immersion sort of field trip. But what is interesting is that I often bring along a lot of stakeholders with me, cross-functionally, including designers, engineers, quality assurance, even technical project manager. Sometimes business operations people also tag along because these colleagues typically don't have that exposure with the end users. So this not just only benefit the product manager in terms of strategizing but it also empowers the team to really execute based on the real problem. So I would say that the impact is immense because sometimes when you are sitting at the air conditioned kind of environment, you wouldn't understand how it is like for let's say a hawker, like a owner who might be very busy when they are doing the cooking and dealing with customers. Like sometimes we would assume that they would be sticking to the app all the time, and that is may not be true. So only when you go and observe, then you would understand that, oh, actually, these merchant owners have their peak hours and non-peak hours, right? And then that's how you start to really design the experience around their day, like a day in the life of a hawker owner, for
Mm.
example. Yeah, so
Yeah.
I would say the impact is that we can validate a lot of our hypothesis in a quick second without
Mm.
like really second guessing. Because sometimes data won't inform you that much, but by having that
Mm.
face-to-face interaction, there are a lot of nuances that we could unpack.
Mm. Yeah, so Anna, really appreciate that you're sharing that. And I'm also a big advocate of user research, especially not just using one method, which is user interviews, the most common method, but actually going down and observing how people use your products or not use your products and actually asking them questions as well. And you've been in Grab for about 9 years, right? That's a really long time in any career that I've seen, and you've been with them since the very, very early days. Can you comment a little bit about how product development has evolved over the years at Grab, like from being like a more small and small startup, right? Going into a scale up and then now going into a listed company. Yeah, can you just comment on that?
Hmm. I would like to sort of break down the phases by different stages. One is from 0 to 1. The second one would be from scale from 1 to million. And then the third one is probably like now with the AI, uh, like what's gonna look like. So when I first joined, I think Grab was like pre-IPO. It was really growing very fast. I still remember like it was very scrappy and but velocity was actually the key back then because at that point all we care was to really quickly dominate the market share. So we were working in like in a very small team, but in a super chaotic kind of environment um, where like velocity and speed was really, really crucial. So, and another thing that I wanted to remind is that back then there were no work from home concept. So, back in those days, working in the office 5 days a week or more, you're required to really work super closely with your designers or engineers, user researchers, and everyone, right? So I was actually one of the like early members of GrabPay team, where we were trying to launch the QR code payment and peer-to-peer transfer. Back then, I think the idea was really, really innovative, right? Only China was really leading, like from WeChat Pay or Alipay, but Grab was the first one to launch this kind of technology in the market. So yeah, so I think back then it was just really things moved really fast and in a very, very hyper growth as well as hyper localized. Um, and later, from 2021, uh, upon Grab got publicly listed on Nasdaq in the US, the company size has obviously has grew, but it did not just grew in terms of user base or market share, but also the business vertical. So at the start, we were really focused on like ride hailing, and then later on expanded to GrabFood, GrabMart, and then Grab Express, and also Grab Financial Services. And now there's also like this digital bank GXS. So when Grab got listed, there were so many business verticals, right? So the scale is definitely different. Like I think it's probably I was employee 1,600. I think now it's probably 11,000 employees. So you can see it's like 10 times growth in terms of employees. So post-listed, I would say that things are more formal and there are more departments and that we need to need to work closely with. So cross-team alignment becomes a very, very important skill set, right? So one thing is that after Grab when listed, there was this change of ways of working. Before IPO, things were more, I would say, uh, velocity was the key. So the way that we execute things was actually based on quality business review, in short, QBR. But what Grab has transformed in terms of product management is that we started to apply this concept called Empower Team. I'm not sure if the audience have ever heard of. So it's this term that there's actually a book about it written by the author Marty Kagan. So Empower Team basically is that the team is actually empowered to conduct the discovery, problem identification, and do all the solutioning, right? So in that sense, how it worked is that every PM at Grab, we own a problem space. So there are PMs that are, for example, focusing on customer experience for transport. And there's also another PM probably focusing on user trust. And for myself, I focus on post-transaction management, meaning that everything that covers merchant, finance, payouts, refunds fall under kind of like my purview, right? So I will lead a cross-functional team of maybe around 20 people from designers, front-end engineer, back-end engineer, QA, business operations to really collectively to have a shared goal. Like what are the goals we want to address in terms of this problem space, right? And then the whole team will actually ideate together. And it's in a way, it's very autonomous because it's no longer like we don't follow the waterfall process anymore where, okay, product manager need to finish the specs and then hand it over to design. No, like the entire team will work concurrently because we are very clear on the objectives on the problem, but different members could have different ways of solving, like coming up with ideas, so then we would discuss and prioritize together. So that's how it has evolved. And before my sabbatical, we also started to have like generative AI sprint, like which lasts for 1 month or 2 months. And that's actually a period where the team could experiment. Like we were like how to call it? It's like a boot camp, and then all the business as usual work will be sort of halted, and then we just focus on this experimentation using AI to see how we can either automate certain processes or elevate the user experience.
Yeah, thank you for sort of like giving us a journey of how you joined very early on and then sort of like seeing how the product process has become more formal over the years as well. Knowing that the employee headcount has increased. But I found something really interesting as you were describing this was that every single product manager own a problem space and own um, whatever revolves around that problem space, which I find interesting. It's almost like you're running your own startup. Given a very small team, you're running your own startup. You probably have your own KPIs and P&L to hit almost. So I find that very, very fascinating, which means Grad has a really solid structure of decentralized command and control, where they trust their head of departments like yourself to kind of like run things and use resources and steward these resources in a really mindful manner and win market share. So knowing that you were always doing this together with your team, being on the ground, getting user research, and launching things really fast, I also want to recognize that it was not without competition, right? A lot of the domains that Grab is in, um, the banks were in, the digital banks were also in, right? Even maybe sometimes it's at a national level, right? I don't know, was Payla implemented before you guys or after, but knowing there were, competitors, there were alternatives, there were substitutes in these markets that you were expanding to. How do you how do you sort of lead your team, right? How do you lead your team to win in these markets? Because you've done that a couple of times, right? Not just 0 to 1 once, but not just for GradPay, but a couple of times. So I'd like you to describe your thinking around that.
Um, okay, so I just share my own real person experience. So I remember when I first became a PM for this role, there was not proper infrastructure for merchant finance related stuff. So what do I mean by that? So imagine that there's already like transaction going on, right? Like customer can place a grab food order, and then all the data flow are stored in the database. But there was a problem because um, those data were just sitting in the backend system. And you can imagine that um, for merchant, what they care is timely and accurate payment, right? So when there's a dispute, they will contact Grab customer support, but there's no way for us to verify. Like when I say there's no way, is that the people who are in the front line, working the front line, addressing customers' concern, they are not able to like solve their problems. So what would happen? There were like tons of escalation and complaints. There are escalated to the engineers, and they have to like really work in wee hours to really go to the backend database to figure out. So I remember I spent hours or if not days and nights trying to like really help the merchant to reconcile on the back end, right? So it was a very humbling experience because of that pain point. Then I realized that, it's really about being a good product manager is about problem solving. So then we just quickly roll up our sleeve. So like in tech, we usually come up with short-term solution and long-term, like a proper solution. So short-term solution could be a hack. So what we did is that maybe we just build some certain script where report can be run on the spot for operations people to identify the transaction. But then we also quickly identify that there's a problem because there's no interface for the internal Grab people to verify those payment transaction. So it took us like really like few sprints, and we built that quickly. And then from there, the complaints have drastically dropped. And what is most importantly is that I felt that the stress level from the internal colleagues has also significantly reduced. I remember one story where my colleague in Thailand, she she told me like, Anna, you have to fix it because the merchant has went to the police to file a complaint against me. So please do help solve this problem. So then it really hit me hard because then I realized that the product that we are doing is not about just numbers. It's really like addressing like a real human being's livelihood. So that's where I feel like the team has at Grab have done significantly well, is by really uh, identify the opportunity and just take actions quickly and not just let it sit there. And yeah, so that would be my
Yeah.
share. Yeah.
I love that philosophy of just rolling up your sleeves and solving problems. And I think a lot of you probably win hearts and minds and customer wallet
Yeah.
share just by actually solving problems that customers actually need to solve. And they're relying on like I believe some of the merchants are relying on Grab quite a lot for their business and their livelihoods as well. Um, but just being very conscious of like competition. Let's say, I don't know, like for example, I think Grab, I'm not sure if Grab is in Indonesia, but as you let's say you expand to Indonesia, you're competing with Gojek in its home ground. How do you think about expansion? Like, do you treat it differently just because you're no longer the first mover, right? Because when you say for GrabPay, you're like kind of the first mover. But let's say you're expanding, you're not the first mover. How do you then win market share? And like your experience, if you have experienced that before.
So for myself, when we decide on product prioritization, we always go with the regional mindset. And but like I would say that we apply 80%, 20% kind of rule. Like 80% is regional, 20% there are certain country customization, mostly due to like regulatory requirements, especially in my problem space, right? So I would say that how do we compete? Actually, I felt like in my problem space, we do have a very upper hand right from the start because if I'm not wrong, other industry players they probably pay merchants like uh, once a week or once every 2 weeks. But in our case, we settle the merchant payment every day, right? So I would say that in order to compete, it's not about being reactive, it's also about being proactive. And before you execute your plan, need to think like 2 or 3 steps ahead, right? And I think it because of this careful strategy of settling daily, it really like it's very hard for competitors to sort of mimic right away. It takes a lot of time and effort. Yeah, so I would say like I like to think about when you
Mm,
plan, it has to be deliberate, but when you execute, it has to be fast.
I love that.
Mm.
And I think what I also gather from what you just shared is like you're being you're being very deliberate, you're being very mindful about where where and what to focus on. So as a product manager, you're probably like having a lot of competing priorities. You have things that you need to think about from the infrastructure level to the technology side to the resources that you were given, and that you have to maximize it. Just wondering, like, how do you build this mindset of like, you know, we're given all this, and this is all we have, right? And we need to win this market, and um, and then like just go out there and win it, right? Especially like someone like yourself, you're coming from more of like a banking kind of like culture where banks actually move a lot slower, right? And at Grab, you're like moving super fast. So I'm just wondering how you kind of like rewire your mindset, but even like your team, right? Because your team has to follow your pace because if not, then you start to lose the market. Yeah.
Well, it's very true. In banking, it's very process driven, compliance focused. Accuracy is the king. But in technology, uh, it's actually quite the opposite. It's about problem solving, it's about iteration, it's about being adaptable, right? So I'm glad that you asked this question because it's not just myself, it's how do I instill that culture to the team? How do I make sure they are also on the same page and then also on the same kind of level of uh, rhythm? So I would say that identifying the key metric, the OKR, objective key result, is very, very important. Because every week we actually do review our OKR, our metrics, and then we will sort of like analyze and sort of also ideate like what could we do better to actually improve those numbers. And OKR metrics, there's like quantitative but also qualitative, right? Quantitative could be financial related or could be like just adoption, but qualitative is also looking at NPS, like Net Promoter Score, to ensure that your users are actually engaging with your features and what's their qualitative feedback, right? And from those, I always get my colleagues to also read them. So then everyone can empathize, like what's really going on the ground, especially if there are 8 markets we may not possibly know all the nuances, but through that very structured kind of meeting and analysis, it really helped everyone to stay focused on the same direction.
Yeah, I really like that. That sort of like how you meet your team. And I understand you had this moment where you transitioned from banking into product management. In fact, you were so serious about getting into tech that you were willing to be an intern at a tech company first before like rising up the ranks. So many of us here who are listening here today, they're trying to get into the tech industry or they're trying to get back into the tech industry maybe after a sabbatical, just like what you're doing right now. So I was wondering how do you thought about like why did you join tech? Like how did you thought about like the pros and cons of like coming in at a lower sort of like pay grade and then like working your way up and was that helpful for your career? Yeah, that transition, I mean.
I think this is a very, very interesting question, and I haven't shared a lot in detail, but happy to share some of my personal humbling experience. So I never expected to do this career change, especially industry change. So when I first joined banking. I remember when I graduated, there were two industries that were really, really popular. One is banking, the other one is consulting. And so I joined banking, uh, but then I felt it was great. I learned a lot about financial markets, client facing, uh, advisory skills, and etc. But then I felt that there was something that banking was too restrictive. That was not, how should I put it? Like, it was not, um, it was not scalable enough in terms of positive impact for the society. I mean, there definitely banking does provide a very tremendous value, right? In the society. But when I say that is that um, I felt that technology was actually more empowering in that sense because sometimes you see like let's say like a older person on the street, and if you kind of like use technology can actually enable a lot to really help this elder person in terms of like, for example, assisting their like their communication. For example, my dad, when he travels, there's Google Translate, right? So I just recognize that actually, if I could combine traditional finance and technology, that would be really awesome because that means that this all this financial accessibility could be democratized to like moms and pops, not just for the wealthy segment. And I was actually highly inspired by Steve Jobs on the design thinking mindset. And technology is not just about accessibility and being scalable, but also need to look like, it also need to be very human, right? Like down to the level of where 3 years old or like 80 years old grandparents can also use it. So I follow my curiosity. I back then like this design thinking IDEO school was so new, and I was just constantly searching on internet, and that's how it led me to my master's degree in digital innovation. And very coincidentally, I was sharing this aspiration where I really wanted to, break into tech. And just one fun fact, when Headhunters was trying to introduce roles to me, it was all based on my previous role, exactly the same, just different company. And I remember I gave them, I would just say this statement to the headhunter. I said the following: I want to join a company that use technology to empower people's lives. And the headhunter was really, really, it was like there was this moment of silence because because obviously the headhunter didn't know how to react. And then their typical response would be like, I'm so sorry, but we don't have this kind of profile in our database. And it's really interesting because this exact statement was aligned with my value and still aligned with my value today. That manifested my first like job opportunity working for Grab like a year later. And so the stars align, and that's how, everything else is history. So what I want
Yeah.
to encourage the audience here is that um, when you are in transition, whether voluntarily or involuntarily, it is important to remind yourself and ourselves that this is the best moment to reflect about who you are, self-awareness, your strengths, your values, and and then also knowing your direction. Because direction sometimes is actually far more important than your effort. If you know where you're going, you know, I think there will be a lot of how do you call it, manifestation going on that will support you to reach your
Mm.
destination. And yeah, so that's
Yeah.
I took a while to explain, but that's how it really happened. So when I was talking to one of my mentors about my aspiration, she was actually one of the early members at Grab, and she opened the doors and asked me, Anna, do you want to come here just to, experience yourself as an intern while you are taking your master's? And I said yes.
I think that's such a interesting and inspiring story to tell because a lot of people who are in banking, they're chasing the dollars, isn't it? They're chasing the money because it's a very well-paid profession, right? I was in financial services myself. The fact that you're willing to sacrifice that for a while to actually find something that really aligns with your values and then like work on it and then actually seeing the results of it over the years, having a such a big payout, having a completely different portfolio right now as a product manager. I think many of us who are product managers here to or were product managers like myself we're learning on the job, right? So we sort of didn't went to school or anything like that. So really inspiring of you to share that. If if you were to, well, why now you're doing a sabbatical, right? So at some point, once you finish your master's, you're gonna kind of like go back and go to your next role. Finance is also changing a lot. It's being shaped by really new technologies like Gen AI. It's being shaped by new ways of working as well, like the blockchain and stuff like that, which I believe you're studying in your program. So knowing that you're doing a fintech program right now with NYU and knowing that at some point your return, what's kind of the next role you're seeing yourself go into? I think it's sort of like Grab has brought you so many beautiful experiences. So I was just kind of curious about that. What's your next role?
Actually, I'm really at the moment, I'm super immersing myself in my studies. There's so much to absorb right now. And think this is actually, I'm also giving myself time to take some step back. So there's this famous term, right? You need to step back in order to jump higher. So I also want to like the reason why I'm pursuing this master's is because I've spent a lot of years in like focusing on Southeast Asia. So I thought by going to New York, studying in at Stern on fintech, it just gives me a bit more comprehensive global view and what's going on from other parts of the world in the fintech space. And so my short-term milestone is to ensure that I really fully go deep in my studies and hopefully through my research on the fintech space, it will kind of like sort of give me some idea like where else I can contribute in my next journey.
All right, so it's kind of like still up in the air and very open
Mm.
right now.
But one,
Um,
sorry, but
yeah, go on.
one thing for sure is that um, it's definitely still very relevant to what I enjoy doing, like problem solving,
Mm,
cross-team collaboration. Um, just a
mm,
really a fun fact, you talk about how technology is also advancing. So even though I'm not working officially as a PM, but recently I just built like a I think I would say okay functional kind of app in 2 hours. So I was actually quite amazed that wow, now with technology, things are just so a lot easier and accessible. So basically, there's this term called vibe coding, right? I'm sure many of you might have
yep,
like using low code or no code. So
yep,
I still enjoy doing that. Yeah, so let's see, like really fluid at this moment.
yeah. I love that, Anna. And it's so important to be hands-on as a product professional right now, which is one of the reasons why, as a school, we're running vibe coding classes as well, and certifying people, making sure they do that within 2 days, and not just to build prototypes, but to also like build production ready apps or close to production ready apps that is functional. Um,
Oh,
so just oh
sorry
yeah, go on.
sorry for interrupt. Actually, I just learned that vibe coding is the first most searched in Collins Dictionary of the year. Do you know that?
Well, that's very new to me. I mean, there's always new terms that are emerging
Yeah.
in the dictionary these days. Yeah, so it's quite interesting. Yeah, so knowing that you have actually done some of that back at Grab, and you're doing vibe coding yourself right now, what do you think? Like you've been the lead product manager, right? So that's kind of quite a senior role. How do you think product managers should evolve moving forward, right? With all these advancements in technology, what would make them continue to be relevant?
So, I think with the technology advancement, especially now with AI, that it's really evolving in a record speed. Think product manager role, um, I would say that there are few areas that things will be expected to, in terms of like how do you call it, the process of like of the job scope will be a lot compressed. For example, uh, few areas, user research, analysis. Um, for the if you conduct user research together with a designer, for example, you still need that human to human connection. But when it comes to um, like taking meeting notes, for example, we used to really type, right? Now we can transcribe using voice, like a speech to text, right? Or text to speech. So that part of the scope will be very compressed, and also analyzing and summarizing the findings, right? So that part will be one of the example. Then second would be also product specking. So when I was vibe coding, I actually I was just giving very specific context to the AI tool, right? And then, so for product specking, I think it becomes like the PM will spend less really writing, but more time doing the evaluation and judgment work and fine tuning the prompt. So judgment skills would need to be elevated, right? And third one is that also for cross team collaboration, I would say that we still require, you still need to like really work well cross functionally. But the difference is that you will no longer just work with like people's work. You will need to judge their work that they use AI to produce. So that goes back to your taste and judgment, right? Like when you're working, for example, with a designer, and you need to have a very good discernment what is a good design or a bad design, or even for engineer, right? Like what is scalable, what is not scalable. So yeah, so I would say that the role will still remain, but then just that the I would say that the different cross functional skills will be more blended. So recently, I saw a LinkedIn post saying that if you if you have a specific domain that you're very good at, but then if you branch it out, for example, you are very strong in marketing, go-to-market strategy, it will make you even a stronger PM because now with AI, everyone's skills can be in the same level playing field because it's so accessible and so democratized, right? So then if you have an edge being a good marketer, you will become even a stronger PM. Similarly, for a designer who knows how to code, the quality of the product would be even higher. So I would say that timing wise, it'll be more compressed. Things that used to takes months and weeks now is in terms of days and hours, right? But again, the judgment and the taste skills would be super critical
Mm.
with this transition.
Yeah. Well, thank you for the insights on that, and I fully am aligned with you based on the client projects that we've been tasked to undertake this year, helping product teams to transition. And I was just wondering, you earlier you were saying something about go to market. When you were at Grab, did you had to do go to market, or was that like a different function? Yeah.
We have dedicated product marketing manager that we work with, but now with Empower team, sometimes we may or may not have a dedicated marketing manager working alongside. But being a PM is super important to understand go to market in terms of market sizing opportunity and the target segment. Because if we don't design that early on, then like your all the user journey or hypothesis might not be tailored to the right specific audience that we meant to solve for.
Mm. Yeah, so I find it really interesting that you were learning on the job and you have this sort of way of building that I feel very aligned with as well. And we're very lucky to have GX Bank and GXS Bank as our clients for training. But just wondering, like, did you learn all this while being on the job, or were you like reading? And if you're reading, or listening to podcasts, like, is there any specific recommendations? Yeah.
So both. So I was actually, like I mentioned earlier, that I was in when I started at Grab, I was also doing a master. So this is, by the way, this is my second master. So I was doing my first master in digital innovation. So I was actually learning from that master's, but at the same time, I read a lot of books around design thinking, lean startup, agile. So it's a very cross-disciplinary kind of knowledge gathering process. But most importantly, I was very hands-on when it comes to experimentation. I still remember when I was just starting at Grab, I learned how to prototype a chatbot. That was back in that day, chatbot was not a thing. So I actually built a prototype together with some colleagues and I sent it to the customer support team manager. And then it was quite innovative back then. So I would encourage that now with AI and vibe coding, if you have identified any great ideas and you think your solution can really solve the problem, just by all means, just leverage that and just talk to the stakeholder and get feedback and then iterate. That's how I learn. It's really both off off the job training and on the job training.
Yeah, I really like that. And there is a question from the audience. I believe it's someone from Myanmar, and she's asking that her product manager refuses to set metrics for the product that they're working on. And his excuse is that it's very hard to set metrics and business goals and vision since it's always changing. Uh, so so she's kind of frustrated. I believe she's working in the product team. She's a little bit frustrated. Like, do you have any advice for product managers who don't really have clear objectives or vision? How would you advise them to set like very clear success metrics for their products?
Um, may I just clarify what's the role of this person who raised this?
Yeah. So, I mean, yeah, you could share like, are you a designer? Okay, she's a designer. Yeah.
So, okay, so what gets measured gets managed. If there's no measurement, you cannot manage. So I would suggest that the designer that there are some metrics that can also consider from a design or user experience point of view. So for example, sorry, I don't have enough context, but just loosely speaking, for example, if you're working on a very B2C, like a consumer focused um, kind of products, right? There's typically a few types of metrics, like for example, adoption, engagement, satisfaction. Um, so, so I would say that you could actually volunteer and then sort of
Yeah.
identify the areas of measurement, but just focus on one that is very key. Usually, from what I like to do personally, I like to tie the metrics to uh, organization financial kind of performance. So, in simple terms, either you help the company make money or save money, right? So it could be user growth as well, because user growth could translate to business performance. So I would typically prefer to use that like a financial metric as the most important primary metric. Then you can have secondary metric, which is more like potentially about user satisfaction. So user satisfaction depends on whether you have certain things in the, like 5-star review, that kind of thing, or some like a free text description. That could be something you might want to consider. But don't wait.
Mm.
You could drive that as a designer, I would say.
Well, that's really great advice. And I also noticed the same thing because we train both product designers and product managers. in our training institute. And sometimes we realize that product managers, they are a little bit more junior, or they're a little bit more underprepared for their role. So I'm with alignment with Anna on like don't wait, just like identify the metrics, knowing that you're building resident apps for commercial estates or like job portals for HR. Like user growth is like a really great metric. Another great metric is like how many things have they completed in the app. So like if let's say they're a resident, they're using the app, like are they checking the news? Are they checking the notifications? Are they checking their inbox? So all these things like the user activity can actually be measured. And if it's being used, then it's good. If it's not, then you
Yeah.
know your app function and job to be done is kind of like not matching, not matching right there, right? Or people are not feeling like they can solve the problem. Yeah.
I would just like to,
So
sorry.
go on.
I
Yeah.
just like to add on, maybe for use a designer, because I know you guys are very visual, is that just map out the entire end-to-end user journey and then build, work with, if you do have a data analyst, work on a funnel, right? Because usually the first is like open the app, log in, and then down to completion of a task, like what Dalen said, right? I think hopefully that will help you. Like when you run your meetings, you will have that data live week by week, so you know where you should put more effort or prioritization towards that entire user
Yeah.
journey.
Yeah, I also say it's quite common for product designers to even become product managers eventually. So who knows, right? If you're leading the charge on measuring, the management might see, hey, actually, you're doing a pretty good job. Like they may give you your own product to run as well. So hope this answer your question. And we're almost towards the end of the session itself. Just want to kind of like wrap up, talking back about our teams, the theme of the session itself, which is about career pivots and product pivots. Uh, and knowing that you've built a lot of products from 0 to 1, I don't think you always get it right the first time. I think that's the reality of it. So how do you manage pivots, right? Like what kind of mindset do you bring, and what kind of actions and behaviors do you need to have in order to manage pivots well, whether it's in a career or whether it's in a product? Yeah.
So I think the word pivot came from, it's a French term. And apparently in the dance, there's this movement called pivot turn. That means like one foot stays stationary and the other foot can sort of move and sort of uh, like a cerebral around, right? So I would say that for me personally, like always go back to the basics. So one thing that I wanted to highlight is that even with all these technology advancement, staying human and keeping user as centric is still very essential and is timeless. It will never change, right? Especially working in tech. Who are you designing for? Who are you solving problem for? So that is, I would say, I will always stay very stable from one foot, right? But the other is that how do you solve the problem can be very different. There could be many different ways to solve it. So keep options open, but up to a certain point, you also need to be realistic where there's a time and cost. Then you have to like really, really converge and really pick one of the best solution to solve the problem. So I would say that I have experience where I thought that my solution or the problem that I was solving was the right problem to solve until it was proven wrong, right? But the lesson that I learned is that, especially when I work with so many people cross-functionally, um, changes are inevitable, but make sure that, again, go back to that principle. When you do planning, do research, discovery, you can be very deliberate. Strategizing can be very deliberate. But once you have done your proper homework, execution can be super fast. So minimize the change closer to the when the all the codes are complete, when the product is about to launch, the changes should be very, very minimal. And that would require the product manager to be like 2 and 3 steps ahead, so that you will anticipate that, okay, there won't be a lot of changes towards the end. But if there's really critical like add-on requirements that must be embedded in the product flow, what I always like to do is that I will have a MVP like sort of frozen, but anything else that is urgent, I would just sort of like put in the sprint backlog as a fast follow-up, in short, FFU. So the engineers would know, okay, what is launch blocker and what is not launch blocker. So all the FFUs will catch up in the subsequent releases. Yeah, so for career as well, I would say that if you, I know I have actually recently, I just mentored some like women. There were like 30 women showed up, and a lot has expressed similar kind of like desire to pivot or to break into tech, right? I would say that same, like your opportunity cost would just get higher as you get older. If you do have that gut of transforming or, do something that you really, really aspire to, just do it sooner rather than later. Minimize the risk as you get older. Yeah.
Yeah, like minimizing your regret as well. So, really wonderful conversation this evening with Anna, and thank you so much, Anna, for sharing so honestly. And I know we didn't get into a lot of details about like how exactly did you launch GrabPay, but I'm not sure if we should, but I'm sure there will be opportunities in future, and you're open for people to come look up to you and on LinkedIn for mentorship.
Yeah, happy, and just reach out to me on LinkedIn, and yeah, like
Excellent.
thanks for having me. Yeah,
Yeah.
very pleasant.
So I think what pleasantly surprised me about this conversation is also learning about your product philosophy, product management philosophy, but also product leadership in action. I think Grab was very lucky to have you, and I think it was a perfect partnership where you were given the playground to like launch things, and they had a good leader to kind of like help them get into market and who's familiar with the banking space. So I think that's sort of like that magic going on over there. And thank you so much for sharing here for this session, and thank you everyone for coming and attending our live session here today. This is our last session for the year. We're actually going to take a break in December. So please come back in January and keep a lookout for our next speaker in January. And with that, we shall end the session tonight. And thank you, Anna.
Thank you. Have a good evening, everyone.
All right.